Hello everyone and welcome to the other semi-final game from the Freestyle Chess G.O.A.T Challenge 2024. It's Levon, Aronian versus Fabiano, Caruana. If you haven't seen the game Magnus versus Noderbeck, do check it out, and also do check out Alireza versus Ding. I still have to check on Vincent versus Gukesh. Haven't seen the game yet, but if it's a nice one, I will definitely show it. So let's check it out. First game of the semi-finals. Let's see what happened. Levon with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4, hence the quote above the board. Even though, you know, this is official random, the e4 isn't the usual e4, but still, I thought it'd be nice. Pawn to e5, we have knight to g3, and pawn to f6. Again, the usual stuff, freeing up the queen, freeing up the bishop, freeing up the rook a little bit. We have pawn to f3, pawn to c6, and now pawn to d4. Striking in the center, bishop to c4, attacking the rook, and knight c to e2, defending against the capture. We have knight to g6, developing the knight, and pawn to b3, chasing the bishop away. And while Fabi could bring it back to f7 or even all the way to g8, then it would just be a very weird piece after c4 is played and not a very useful one. So okay, he does take the knight. He gives up the so-called advantage of the bishop pair, as it, you know, seems to hurt less than to tug this bishop back all the way to g8. We have knight captures on e2, and now queen to f7. Nicely continuing development, we have pawn to c4 and castles kingside. So now, you know, if you look at the position now, seems like a pretty regular position you could have in normal chess. We have pawn to d5, grabbing more space in the center, stopping d5 from black. C captures on d5, c captures, and now bishop to d6. You'd probably, you know, expecting pawn to d6, but the problem with pawn to d6 is how do you develop your bishop? You could still play something like a6, bishop to a7, then trade off the bishops. It's definitely a possibility, but Fabi does bishop to d6, and it is the top move recommended by the engine, so Fabi playing the usually strong moves. Bishop to e3, and now knight to f4, putting pressure on the g2 pawn, so queen f2, and now knight to e7. This is how Fabi develops, and now he might play something like rook c8, rook c7, bring the other rook to c8, double up on the c file, and have a very nice position. So here, Levon castles, and rook f to c8, as expected. King to h1, very useful. You don't want your king and queen on the same diagonal. A bishop to c5 might hurt in some lines. So pawn to a6, and now pawn to g3, kicking away the knight. Knight captures on e2, queen captures, and now bishop to c5 with plan of d6 to be played next. The bishop to d3, pawn to d6, and now this next move by Levon is really interesting. Levon plays bishop to d2. Now it does allow you to remaneuver the bishop, for example, if you needed e1 to control this diagonal, maybe shifted over to f2, shifted over to a5 if needed. But what it generally does is it prevents Fabi from trading off bishops, and this still, you know, keeps the bishop pair advantage for Levon. So bishop to d4 attacks the rook, and now rook a to d1. Again, not rook a to c1, trading a pair of rooks, but rook a to d1. Levon just keeping stuff on the board. Queen to h5, now stopping f4 as the queen is on e2, just queen to g2, preparing pawn to f4, king to h8, and now pawn to f4. Trying to get those bishops to come alive, but also planning g4, h4, g5, and so on. So h6, we have pawn to g4, attacking the queen, queen g6, and now queen to h3. Queen to h7, because how do you develop otherwise? Look at this. The knight has no squares. The rook, nothing to do really. All of these squares are controlled by Levon's pieces or pawns. You can't really, you could play with something like rook to c7, maybe try to double up here, but then g5 could be very annoying. So and even a move like bishop to c3, trying to trade off a pair of bishops, you can just move the bishop. Still, not much to be done here for Fabi. So instead, he plays queen to h7. This allows the knight to come to g6, plus also g5 isn't all that impressive now. So Levon plays pawn to f5. He stops the knight from coming to g6 and just asks, okay, what is your next move? So not a lot for Fabi to do. He plays bishop to c3, bishop to e3, and he goes back, bishop to d4. Fabi would welcome a repetition here, but Levon says, nope, let's play on. And while he could bring the bishop back, he says bishop captures on d4, now as the d6 pawn will become a weakness. So e captures on d4, and queen to g3, attacks the pawn here, rook to d8 defending, and now Levon claims the open c file, rook to c1, and you could go for rook a to c8, and probably even should, because after captures, okay, knight will capture, so you keep defending d6 pawn, and then maybe queen e1 with some action on the queen side. But other than that, it's you know, pretty good maneuver for black. But Fabi goes rook to d7 instead first, and now just pawn to h4. Levon continues pushing, rook to c8 now, and we have a trade. Rook captures, knight captures, and rook to c1. The b7 pawn is now nicely defended, so probably that's why Fabi played this move first. But now by moving the rook away from the back rank, rook to c1 comes with tempo. Now the knight is hanging, so knight to e7 and rook to c2. Levon could also just play queen to g1, go after the d4 pawn right away. It's not like Fabi can defend it, but he goes rook to c2 first. Probably with ideas of maybe if needed you can double up on the c file, or maybe if you play g5 and the position opens up, you will have some h2 check possibilities along with maybe rook to c8 check if the knight ever moves from e7. So, you know, a nice improvement by Levon. The engine doesn't really see the point of it, but you know, as a human, definitely we can appreciate rook to c2. So queen to g8, we have queen to f2 going after the pawn here, and queen to b8. Defending b7, defending d6, and of course waiting for queen captures on d4. But if queen captures on d4, then rook to c7, and Fabi is confident that he will be able to hold this. But Levon just continues pushing. Pawn to g5, knight to g8, keeping control of everything here, and now even pawn to g6. And this looks like pretty bad decision from Levon. Like the bishop is now at the base of a pawn chain, and there's no way for you to actually bust open the king side now that you've locked your own pawns on light squares, and Fabi's pawns are on dark squares. As you'll see, it definitely has a purpose. Rook to c7, offering a rook trade. Now rook c4. He says, all right, we can trade, but I'm going to improve my position by playing b captures on c4. And there's really no good way to continue this. You could play pawn to b5, but then you give up the d4 pawn. So he traded rook captures, b captures, and queen to a7, now defending the d4 pawn. So Levon decided not to capture it. Queen to b2, the only way to keep some pressure, you will be putting pressure on b7, and also you want to attack the d6 pawn. So queen to c5, Fabi sacrifices the b7 pawn, even though you could play something like pawn to b6. Pawn to b6 is very nice, because if queen captures on d4, then you play queen to c7, and you've stopped c5 altogether. And even you know, okay, White's position is a little bit better. He's controlling a bit more space. There's no clear way on how to break through, but b6 is a really weird move to find. So Fabi played queen to c5. He sacrificed the b7 pawn, but this is now much better for Levon than the position that we've discussed. We have queen to a5. Again, he's saying, okay, you push your pawn, you know, you create a pass pawn, but I will have all the drawing resources that I need with this queen to e1 check. But now Levon just goes back, queen to b2. And okay, queen to e1 with check, king g2, queen captures on h4. Now Fabi also creates a passed h-pawn. We have queen captures on d4, queen to g5 with check, king to f3, queen to h5 with check, king to f2, queen to h5 with check, king to e1, and now queen captures on a2. Now Fabi has a passed h-pawn and a passed a-pawn. But Levon plays queen to b6. Interestingly, you could also play c5 right away. It looks like, again, one of those moves that you should not be able to play, because there's queen to a5 check and you just take the pawn. But the problem is after king e2 and let's say d captures on c5, attacking the queen, there's queen c4. Now you'll take the a6 pawn, and you'll still have the passed d pawn that will win you the game. But okay, queen to b6 was played, and now queen to a3, putting pressure on the bishop, king d2 defending, now queen to a2 check, going after the white king, bishop to c2, and now queen captures on c4. Queen captures on d6, Levon now creates a passed d pawn, and queen to d4 with check. We have king e2, and now pawn to h5. Fabi starts pushing the h pawn, queen to a3. Putting pressure on the a6 pawn, but you know, more than anything, just keeping the white king safe and preparing to advance the pawn to d6. So queen to g1, pawn to d6. Now Fabi again relying on some checks. Queen to g2 check, king to d1, queen to f1 check, king to d2. We have queen to f2 check, king to c1, and now pawn to h4. Now it's even stronger as the king is on the back rank, so you know, a promotion will come with check, but still no way of actually touching h3 without helping out with the black queen. So here we have queen to d3. Also d7 could be a bit problematic. It doesn't work for Fabi really, because after queen to f1 with check, you don't have to move the king. You can also play king back to d2, but the idea was if king b2, then queen to b5 check to win the pawn. So Levon doesn't want to calculate all of this. He just plays queen to d3, puts the queen behind the pass pawn, and now he's just going to push it. So again, Fabi has to rely on checks. Queen g1 check, king to b2, now queen to b6 with check, and the bishop to b3. Queen back to f2 with check, king to b1, and queen to e1 with check. We have king to c2, queen to f2 with check, queen to d2 blocking, and now queen to c5 with check. Now, if the queen blocks, of course, you take the pawn. So king to b2, and now what do you play here? There's not much you can do because after queen to b2, it was in this position on move 62 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The pass pawn is unstoppable, and that's pretty much it. You could throw in some checks like queen e5 check, king to a2, and now, okay, this is impossible as the queen covers the a5 square, but now you're going to have to block the pawn. And now look at this, d7, queen to d8, now you're going to play bishop captures on g8. You do not want that knight getting in the way of your plans, and after king captures, queen to d5 check. And now look at this beautiful pawn on g6 that Levon used to sort of close the position and prevent himself from attacking. Now if king to f8, now queen to f7 is checkmate. So you have to go back, and then it's a matter of a simple queen to c6 followed by queen to c8. You're going to trade queens and win the game. There's really nothing you can do after queen a5 check, king to b3. There are no more useful checks, and next move, of course, queen to c8 followed by queen to d8. That's game over. So yeah, brilliant stuff by Levon, and like I said, I really enjoyed that bishop move where Levon just wanted to keep material on the board. He first avoided the trade of bishops, moved the bishop back to d2, then he did not develop the rook via the c1 square. He played rook to d1, keeping the rooks on the board, and it was just a true masterclass of, you know, playing weird positions that were never reached before, and Levon, we all know, is a true master of that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see if Fabi will be able to bounce back tomorrow, and will Nodilbrek will also be able to bounce back tomorrow. If not, we seem to be on our way to a Magnus Levon final, which will, of course, be a spectacle. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Robert Arathun, Alexandru Gita, David Gasparian, Kevin Hawkins, and B4 Forever for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.